Welcome to PC Hardware Therapy and to today's video where we will be checking if upgrading from a Ryzen5 3600 to a Ryzen7 5700 X3D will boost gaming performance for a system with a now mid-range graphics card, the Radeon RX6800 in 2026. Now while the 5700 X3D CPUs are not available anymore new, you could snag one from the second-hand market, although the prices have steadily gone up there too. Having said that, I would not recommend building a new system based on AM4 right now, as new platforms are already available for a while. But if you are already on AM4 platform, this might be the final push your computer needs to jump one or two platform generations. And in the end of the video, I will share with you an insight on when you will be able to grab such a processor, so stick around if you're interested. Now let's just do a quick comparison of the specifications of both these processors. The difference between a Ryzen 5 and a Ryzen 7 is the core count, with the Ryzen 7 having 8 cores versus the 6 of the Ryzen 5 processor. One of the other biggest differences is the presence of 96 megabytes of 3D V-cache on the 5700 X3D versus the 32 MB on the 3600. To accommodate the 3D V-cache, the 5700 cannot run as high a frequency as the 3600, so the base frequency is set to 3 GHz, a whole 600 MHz lower than the Ryzen 5 3600, and the boost frequency is also 100 MHz lower than the Ryzen 5. It would be interesting to see if, as a result of this frequency disparity, if there is any degradation of performance in games or not. Now, if you're on an older AM4 motherboard with an older chipset, for example the B450 we have in here, first make sure that your motherboard supports the new CPU, then make sure you have the up-to-date BIOS which supports this CPU. Without this, your PC might not even boot. So even though the BIOS of our PC is up to date, let us update it to the latest version anyway. Now the process to update the BIOS will vary depending on your motherboard. After downloading the BIOS and checking the SHA-256 hash, which can be done via Windows itself, you put the downloaded BIOS update to a USB drive and follow the instructions for your motherboard to flash the BIOS. Now let's do a quick unboxing of the Ryzen 7 5700 X3D CPU. Here it is, the Ryzen 7 5700 X3D. Let's open this. I have to be careful that I don't drop it accidentally. And here it is. What else is in the box? An instruction manual and warranty information. And an important please read card which says that you need to update the BIOS of your motherboard, otherwise the system might not even boot. And actually this is the cooler that comes with the processor. This is an interesting consideration. If you're still upgrading from Ryzen 5 3600 and you use the stock cooler, make sure you also buy a cooler for your new CPU, because the 5700 X3D doesn't come with one. So you need to buy an aftermarket cooler. Thankfully, in our PC we already have an aftermarket cooler, so we don't have that problem. So let's roll in the music, install the CPU and see what it can do in the games. Oops, that wasn't necessary. Anyway. The CPU is in. Now we'll make use of some Arctic MX4 thermal compound. Let's go with the X method. I'm sure there will be a lot of comments on the internet that you should have done the bean method or spread it out. Well, I think this should work. Now it's time to mount the cooler. The Skyth Mugen 5. I did a video previously of unboxing this cooler, so if you haven't checked it out, you can check it out. Let's insert it nice and slow. Make sure it's aligned with the screws. Alright, our CPU is installed. Now let's connect all the fans and let's see if we can boot. Now before I close all the panels, let's make sure that the system is booting. Moment of truth. Now I haven't booted it before, so I'm gonna do it live. Let's see. Switch on the power supply. See some lights pop up on the motherboard. Here we go. The fans are spinning. At least this fan is spinning. Come on. The RAM lights are on. There's a display. Ooh. We detect a new FTPM firmware update version process, which will change the data structure of the storage space for the firmware TPM. Now since I did not apply an FTPM function before, I will just press Y to continue. Okay, we are booting now. Let's go into the BIOS. Okay, new CPU installed, it says. F1 to run setup. Alright. I don't know if you can see it clearly. Here it says the Ryzen7 5700 XT CPU. I also noticed that the memory frequency is dialed back. The XMP profile does not load automatically. On this board I have to manually key in the XMP profile, so let's do that now. And we have a boot with the correct memory timings. Yes, now the timings are correct. Now let's close up the machine, put all the panels back, and then run our gaming tests and see what is the difference, if any, in all the games. Here is a side-by-side comparison of the two CPUs in CPU-Z, followed by a quick look at the system specifications where we will be running our tests, and all footage is captured externally with a capture card. Now we have a 15 game benchmark, and each game will be tested in 3 different settings. In low settings, we are trying to remove the GPU bottleneck to see what will be the difference when you pair these CPUs with a higher end GPU than what is in this system. In medium settings, we are trying to stress both the CPU and the GPU to see how games will be affected in this typical situation. And finally, in ultra settings, we are stressing the GPU to its limit. We also enable RTX wherever possible. This will show if you already have a capable GPU and are GPU bound. Will there be any improvement with this X3D CPU? Let us see. Every game benchmark will be run 3 times and the median value of the 3 average FPS values will be taken, and the same will be done for the 1% low values. This will give us the value which lies mostly in the middle of the 3 readings. The first of the games in the benchmark is Black Myth Wukong, an FPS game released back in 2024 and is based on the Unreal 5 engine on DirectX 12. We are running the inbuilt benchmark. In low settings, the game shows around 9% improvement with the 5700 X3D over the Ryzen5 3600 and shows 19% improvement to the 1% low FPS. Now this game is really heavy on the GPU and it becomes already GPU bound in 1080p medium settings, resulting in minuscule 5% improvement to both the average and the 1% low FPS, and little to no improvement in 1440 high preset. Our next FPS title for the benchmark is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, powered by its foundation engine based on DirectX 12. Here we see a massive performance improvement in low and medium settings. In low settings, there is a whooping increase of 72% in the average FPS and even more massive 86% in the 1% low FPS. Medium settings sees an improvement of 53% in average FPS and 82% in 1% low FPS. In ultra settings, the game becomes GPU bound with slightly worse average FPS, but still pushing an improvement of 11% in 1% low FPS. Moving into our open world FPS games, the first one being Far Cry 6, released in 2023 based on Ubisoft's Dunia engine. Here we see an improvement across the board in all settings during the inbuilt benchmark. In low settings, we see both average FPS and 1% low FPS improve by around 55%. Improvements continue in medium settings with average FPS gaining by 50% and 1% low FPS by 44%. Even at high settings, the game manages to achieve an improvement of 13% in average FPS and 23% in 1% low FPS with the help of the Ryzen 7 5700 X3D, resulting in more fluid frames in the game. Based on the Unreal 4 engine on DirectX 12, we have our next open world FPS, Hogwarts Legacy. Since there is no inbuilt benchmark available, it was tested by running the same route 18 times. In low settings, without ray tracing, the average FPS increased by 44%. However, the 1% low FPS did not see a significant boost, only managing 26% improvement. In medium settings with ray tracing, the average FPS still increased by 36%. However, the 1% low did not see any improvement at all. In fact, the performance decreased slightly, hinting to a slight overhead with the 5700 X3D. Now in Ultra preset with ray tracing on, the 1% low FPS remained the same, while the game only managed slight improvement of 6% in the average FPS in this GPU bound situation. Our next open world FPS title is Cyberpunk 2077 and its Red Engine 4 is based on DirectX 12. Here we are testing in 4 different settings in the inbuilt benchmark. In low preset, the game manages to improve by 55% in average FPS and 48% in 1% low FPS. Get this, the 138 FPS average on the Ryzen 5 3600 is the 1% low FPS on the Ryzen 7 5700 X3D. This continues exactly into the medium settings, with both settings on these CPUs hitting similar absolute maximums when the game is CPU bound and the GPU still had room to breathe. The situation quickly changes, however, in the Ultra preset when we see the game becomes GPU bound, with both the average FPS and 1% low FPS improving by 7% and 10% respectively. In the RT medium preset with ray tracing on, the game becomes fully GPU bound, meaning not much improvement can be seen with the Ryzen 7 part. Red Dead Redemption 2 is our next open world FPS title based on their Rage engine built on Vulkan graphics. In low settings, the game showed an improvement of 37% in average FPS and 22% in 1% low FPS. This trend continued in medium settings, where the average FPS improved by 36% and the 1% FPS showed a bigger gain of 40%. In Ultra preset, the game became GPU bound and there is a reduction of performance by 4 to 5%. This could be due to the lower clock speed of the 5700 X3D over the Ryzen 5 3600. Next up is a DirectX open world FPS title, Kingdom Come Deliverance. It utilizes a heavily modified version of the Crytek engine. We see performance improvement across the board on all different settings. In low and medium settings, both the average FPS and 1% low FPS improved by exactly 46%. Get this, the 1% low FPS with the 5700 X3D was even more than the average FPS achieved with the 3600. Now in the GPU heavy ultra high preset, the game still showed an improvement with the 5700 X3D by 45 to 48% in an average and 1% low FPS. Overall, an amazing performance improvement in this game, making it a class apart. Our first DirectX 11 title is the legendary GTA 5, which needs no introduction. The game has an artificial FPS cap of 188 FPS, meaning the average FPS was stuck at this value in both low and medium settings. And the 1% low FPS were unpredictable for both processors, and even the 3D V-cache of the 5700 X3D did not help overcome this. In somewhat GPU heavy, very high setting, the average FPS improved by 30%, although the unpredictable 1% low FPS result again showed up twice in the 3 runs on these settings, achieving only 5 FPS on the 5700 X3D. The last open world FPS is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, utilizing its Red Engine 3 based on DirectX 12. In low settings, the game manages to achieve a whopping 73% more average FPS and 59% improvement to the 1% low FPS with the 5700 X3D. In medium settings, the average FPS improved by 32% and 1% low by 43%. The 1% low FPS with the 5700 X3D in both medium and low settings are actually more than the average FPS on the 3600. In ray tracing preset, the 6800 X3D is the bottleneck. As a result, there is absolutely no difference in performance between these processors. With that, we go on to some racing games and see if there is any performance differences. First up is Forza Horizon 4 on Forza Tech engine and is based on DirectX 12. In this game, we see 28 to 44% improvements in all settings in both average and 1% low FPS. And once again, the 1% low FPS on the 5700 X3D really outperforms the average FPS on the Ryzen 5 3600. Next racing game is Assetto Corsa Competizione, which uses Unreal Engine 4 and is based on DirectX 11. Have a look at the massive performance improvement we get with this title with the 5700 X3D. In low settings, the average FPS improves by 78% and 1% low FPS improved by 72%. In medium settings, sees even higher improvement, with the average FPS improving by 82% and 1% low FPS gaining by 84%. Even in the epic settings, the new CPU manages to improve the average FPS by 59% and 1% low FPS by 52%. Next up is an older simulation titled Train Simulator Classic 2024. This game is based on DirectX 9 and is not very optimized and always presents the PCs with the challenge to run it smoothly. In lowest settings, the average FPS improves by 71% and 1% low by 62%. The trend continues in medium settings. The average FPS increases by 45% and 1% low FPS is increased by 35%. Even in the highest settings, although the gains are very small, 11 and 5 FPS respectively for the average FPS and 1% low FPS, since every frame counts at this low FPS, it is still significant at 42% improvement in average FPS and 26% on the 1% low FPS. Now we move to some esports titles, with the first one being Fortnite, based on the more recent Unreal Engine 5.1 on DirectX 12. A massive improvement can be seen in low and medium settings to the average FPS, showing 83 and 69% improvements respectively. In epic settings, with ray tracing, the game sees however no improvement to the average FPS, which is expected since the game is fully GPU bound. The 1% low FPS improvements are in another league. The improvements in low, medium and epic ray tracing settings are literally off the charts, resulting in, get this, 37, 24 and 12 times, not percentage, more 1% low FPS respectively, eliminating all stuttering from this game. Our next esports title is CounterStrike 2, which is based on Valve's Source 2 engine running on DirectX 11. CS2 is all about having high FPS, and with the Ryzen7 5700 XT, one can achieve above 500 average FPS from the 300 possible with the Ryzen5 3600. This processor is really in a class of its own, delivering such high FPS. Even the 1% low FPS improved from 129 to around 232 in low and medium settings, which is 80 to 88% improvement. Our last title in the lineup is Rainbow Six Extraction, which runs on DirectX 12. In low preset, the performance improves by 25% in average FPS and 28% in 1% low FPS. The trend continues in medium preset with a higher gain of 28% in average FPS and 30% improvement in 1% low FPS. Ultra settings sees the game becoming GPU bound, resulting in no improvement. In fact, the 1% low FPS reduces by 7%. This could be another game where we see a reduction in performance due to the lower clock speed of the Ryzen 7 processor. Now let's have a look at the average FPS improvements of all 15 games. In low preset, we see that 6 games in the lineup had their average FPS improved by 71 to 85% and 5 titles between 37 to 56%. There were 4 titles which showed less than 30% improvement even at this low settings profile. Going to 1080p medium settings profile saw still 3 games improving their performance by more than 70% and 5 games by 44 to 53% and 5 games improved between 28 to 37%. 2 games improved less than 10%, one of them being GTA 5 with its max FPS cap of 188 FPS. As we move to the GPU bound 1440p Ultra Epic settings with ray tracing wherever possible, there was still one title which achieved 60% improvement in average FPS and 5 games still achieving between 28 to 42% improvement. 6 titles showing less than 13% improvement and 2 titles showing a slight decrease in average FPS, which could be explained by the lower clock speed of the 5700 X3D. Here is a look at 1% low FPS improvements in all the 15 games. In 720p low preset, 4 games saw an improvement above 70%, with 5 titles between 46 to 61% improvement and 5 of them between 19 to 36%. GTA 5 delivered unpredictable 1% low FPS even with the 5700 X3D with 32 gigs of RAM. Moving on to 1080p medium settings, 4 titles saw above 80% improvement to their 1% low FPS and 8 titles saw an improvement from 30 to 45%. Here we see no surprise with GTA 5, but Black Myth Wukong only saw an improvement of 4% and Hogwarts Legacy saw a decrease in performance by 4%. Continuing to 1440p Ultra Epic settings with ray tracing on, Fortnite enjoyed over 1000% improvement and 3 titles saw an improvement above 40%, 3 more improved between 23 to 31% and 4 titles improved by less than 10%. Leaving out GTA 5, 2 titles saw slight decrease in the 1% lows in this GPU bound setting. Looking at these benchmarks, now it's time for the conclusion. Upgrading from the Ryzen 5 3600 to the Ryzen 7 5700 X3D brings another class of CPU to the table with exceptional performance if you have a capable GPU to pair with it. We saw that the Ryzen 5 3600 was holding back the RX6800 XT, which is similar in performance to an RX7800 XT, RX9060 XT, and in Nvidia terms to an RTX 3080, 4070, and 20% slower than an RTX 5070 without ray tracing enabled. After installing the 5700 X3D, the 6800 XT could stretch its legs further. Upgrading to this CPU is the easiest in-place upgrade you could do. You just need to make sure your motherboard BIOS is up to date and supports this processor. While you cannot buy a new 5700 X3D today, there is news that AMD is going to relaunch the 5800 X3D AM4 processor in Q2 of 2026. 5800 X3D will provide 5 to 8% more performance than 5700 X3D, so this could be a real opportunity to extend the life of your AM4 platform instead of going with the higher cost DDR5 memory based platform. With that said, I would like to thank you for watching this video. It took a lot of time to compile it. If you liked this content, please give it a like and subscribe. Until I see you in the next video, hope you have a great time. Bye for now.